Birds. Board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this morning with a little bit of singing. And today, here is the plan. I'm going to talk to this person named Sam. And there's a person over there, they have a different name. In fact, their name is Elaine, and they are 2/3 of the team. By which I mean Tim DigiSprite. Yeah, that's right. The people who work together and the collaborators. Board games. I'm not gonna shout. Board games. It's what we're talking about. Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Certainly something. Good morning.
And I am Bez. If you're in the New Zealand or Australia, it is approximately bedtime. And today or tonight for you, we are going to be blethering about board games. As always, 10 a.m. UK time, which might be 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. or literally it could be any time of day. I think there's probably a statistic tendency towards certain time zones just because of population and everything, and also more likely based on viewership. But let's not go down that statistical analysis. Let's just focus on the fact that today we are meeting 2/3 of DigiSprite. We are meeting Elaine.
Hello.
And Sam.
Hello.
And before today, the topic is basically going to be working with other people, because you are both people who are collaborating with each other, and of course Robyn, and of course several artists, to create such games as Adventure Mart and all sorts of things. So first of all, let's get stuck into brilliant things. What's a little thing which is brilliant?
Coffee.
Coffee.
That's
how we're all here right now and as awake as we are.
Yeah.
It's almost like we planned that, or you two are just incredibly in sync.
I mean, we do talk a lot about coffee together.
We do, actually, yeah.
We go on expeditions to our local, shout out to Braithwaite's and the Batch in Dundee. They provide the best coffee in Dundee. So if you're in Dundee, hit them up. Get that batch brew.
Yeah, buy locally and stuff.
Buy locally, yes. Buy your brews locally. Support the small businesses. Don't just go to Starbucks. Come on. What even is that? What's going on?
Yeah, why are you even naming names? Just, go to your wee place and enjoy stuff. Maybe go to the Ludicrous if you're in Croydon. Go to, where do people go if they're in? And hello, Alan Oughton. Good morning to you. And can you remind us, Elaine and Sam, whereabouts in the world are you based? Which city?
We are based in Dundee in Scotland. So it is currently just gone 10 a.m. here. Hence the coffee keeping us alive. Or me more than Sam. I'm a layabout work from home writer person who makes my own hours. So normally I don't emerge from like the dank cave that is our bedroom until like 11 a.m. or something. So
that's incredible.
Meanwhile, you're doing the business.
Yep, 6:30 every morning.
Nice.
You've had half a day already, and I'm blinking myself awake on stream.
Now, I can see that, It's going to be such a joyful affair. Let's get stuck right into the recent highlights, living life and seeing the sides. Recent highlights. What is a recent highlight? If you want me to go first, or Elaine?
Oh gosh, recent highlights. So we're ramping up to the launch of our next Kickstarter, so that's been pretty good. Lots of it's always very rewarding when you're going through lots of like play tests and things like that with external reviewers, previewers, and you're getting all this. It's that sort of when the game finally starts to come together, and you're like, okay, we're good to go live, and then I have to slog over Premiere Pro and Blender and everything to put all the videos together and all the promo videos and all sort of stuff. It's exhausting but very rewarding. So that's probably my highlight.
And that's you getting together for your third game, Familiar Alchemy.
Yes, third game, Familiar Alchemy. It's launching on.
Are you feeling a little bit more confident? I mean, each of the previous games has taken a very different path, but both have been very successful. I mean, thanks to Hub Games, of course, I think that it did help you reach a bigger audience. Is that fair to say with Adventure Mart?
Yeah, for sure. It's part of the benefits of going with a publisher and things like that is the wider reach. And obviously they have like lots of contacts with distributors and things like that, so your game hits a wider audience.
So whilst Familiar Alchemy may or may not have the same thing happen to it, do you feel a little bit more confident, the two of you?
With Familiar Alchemy? What do you think, Sam? Are you confident with Familiar Alchemy?
I'm pretty confident, yeah. It's definitely it's a smaller game, so it's a lot easier to manage, both from like a production design standpoint and then also just kind of getting out into the world. But it's been great kind of just focusing on something like a little bit smaller and tighter than Adventure Mart that kind of became a much larger thing.
Yeah, Adventure Mart was 18-month dev cycle, and a full-on deck builder with so much art and everything.
We went through about like 20 full revisions of the rules before it was finished. Yeah.
Whereas Familiar Alchemy came together a lot snappier, a lot like it was out of the gate. It was already had a really good engine underneath it, and since it's a smaller thing, it's
getting back to the recent highlights. I just want to share this photograph. Let me actually take off that banner so you can see the bottom. So on the left, you've got salty matcha, which is matcha with a kind of creamy foam on the top, and that had little mango popping balls on the bottom. Whereas on the right was the Thai milk with the standard tapioca. Now, there it is at home, not as good lighting because it's indoors, but no, it was very enjoyable, and that sits in all its glory, just taking the seal off before I start getting stuck into it. I think salty matcha remains my perfect one. I've decided 25% sweetness.
I didn't realize you could measure sweetness in percentage.
Well, I think it's just their standard. So if you don't ask for any change, they give you 100%. It's 100% of their normal, and the standard options are 0, 25, 50, 75, 100, or 150. If you want even more sweetness, and so I think that most people who go for bubble tea, they have something pretty sweet anyway. So the standard 100% is pretty sweet. But regardless, that was a lot of sugar, and it was the first thing I'd eaten all day at about like 5 o'clock. But regardless, it was a bit of a crash afterwards. I'm not going to lie. So it's worth it, I think.
Sugar will do that to you.
Now, what's your highlight, Sam?
I guess if we're going DigiSprite themed highlight, now that Adventure Mart's kind of out in the world, even though like the world's moving a little bit slower, like it's nice seeing all the reviews coming in. And I've read a couple of reviews that are like yes, like these people really get it, from like top to bottom theme design, and even just like little little things about the engine that they talked about in the reviews, and that's definitely like the most sort of rewarding reviews I've read. Like sometimes you read a review and it's like a bullet point list of like, here's what the game does, and then like a little couple paragraphs of like how I feel about it. But like reading reviews that go like deep on design and stuff like that have been really good. And it's like it's past that point now that it's kind of like I'm starting to realize that Adventure Mart is out in the world and people are actually playing it. Especially since like the launch was delayed because like UK Games Expo got cancelled, and I've also like not really played Adventure Mart with any other humans for a really long time, apart from like the work that we did on the solo mode. So it's great just knowing that the game is out there and people are playing it, and just reading feedback and seeing cards being like photographed on Twitter and things like that. So that's definitely my recent highlight.
Adventure Mart.
Oh, Adventure Mart.
Ooh, look at it.
So we will definitely cover a wee bit of that because there are so many questions to ask regarding that. And for those who don't know, this was put on Kickstarter. Then the Kickstarter was cancelled mainly because Hub Games had reached out during the course of it and said, hey, this looks like something interesting that we'd be interested in working along with you. And you as a trio had decided, yeah, that sounds great. And that's how it happened. Is that fairly true?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was during the UK Games Expo 2019. Because we like to run our Kickstarters at the same time as the UK Games Expo, just because it's a nice sort of, it's a good opportunity to get lots of playtesting done, and people are sort of looking at board games and new games and everything. So the Adventure Mart Kickstarter was going at the same time, yeah, it was literally Rory from Hub Games walking past our stall and seeing the game and approaching us and being like, oh, this is a very, very lovely game. Are you interested in publishing? We're like, oh, hey, okay. And it was Robyn as the managing director who did most of the nitty gritty of all the negotiating.
Okay, let's get into each step of. So this is our main topic, isn't it? Like collaboration. Like how much discussion was there with the three of you before a decision like that?
There was a lot of discussion in between running playtests and prototypes. And
no, I mean specifically about between Rory saying, hey, would you be open to us publishing it, and then going back to Rory and saying, yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion. I'm trying to remember. The decision was made very, very quickly. Pretty much like it was before the end of the expo, wasn't it?
It definitely was, yeah, because we cancelled the Kickstarter while the expo was still on.
You're right, yeah. So we were working away on the stall and everything. So we're like running demos and selling copies of it was Doomsday Bots at the time, because we had our first game like in stock at that point. So we're selling Doomsday Bots and everything.
And Alan Out says it looks wonderful. They really love killer robots, obviously not real ones, or so Alan claims.
So you claim.
I think we should keep an eye on that one.
Because Doomsday Bots might just be practice. You never quite know. Yeah, it was like in between all these demos and selling things that we were snatching our conversations together and huddling around the stall and being like, all right, so like publishing, is this like, are we interested in this? And talking about like what it would mean in the long term, short term, pros, cons, things like that. So it was a lot of discussion in the middle of the UK Games Expo.
Yeah.
Presumably
and the hotel bar at night as well.
Oh, of course, yeah, the hotel bar at night is surrounded by other games folk all in their little clusters, and the hotel receptions are just filled with board games nerds, and we're huddled again in a corner trying to figure out if we want to go with this deal or not.
Now, I'd like to remind everyone watching to feel free to comment, ask questions. I will try to get to everything that is asked, and feel free to follow, especially on YouTube, where I'm going to share a link on because if I get 48 more followers, then I'll get to have my own name on YouTube. And so, yeah, please follow me there. But let's start the questionably quick questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
As ready as caffeine will allow me to be.
Okay. Let's go in order with Sam and then Elaine, because based on speed, it seems Sam's that tiny bit more ready.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have breakfast?
I had a couple of bits of toast, but I'm going to have a proper brunch after we're done the podcast today.
Elaine?
Yes, I did. I had some scones and jam and a latte.
Sam, when did you wake up?
7:30 this morning.
Oh. Elaine?
8 a.m. was my wake up this morning.
Iced coffee or hot tea?
Ooh, iced coffee.
Hot tea.
Oh.
No contest.
Best thing to eat or drink whilst playing games?
Ooh. Probably just some like simple biscuits. Nothing that is sticky.
Like a hobnob?
Yeah, you probably get a hobnob in there, yeah.
Or a fig roll?
A fig roll, as long as it's not like too sticky with the fig, you know?
Okay.
You don't want sticky fingers from the fig.
No. You don't want to get your fig on your fingers and then touch your bits.
Yeah. Gosh, what is the best? I don't know. I don't tend to eat herb when
grapes a lot.
Not even water?
I do. Water, yes. I'll have like some water, or if it's a really intense game, you'll maybe have some form of caffeinated beverage, like a Monster Energy or something else that gives you gamer power. But yeah, I don't tend to eat too much when I'm gaming. Sometimes a wee bowl of grapes is good though.
Who's the last person that you spoke to in person?
Elaine, actually.
Oh, wow. So you live close enough that... Are you in each other's bubble?
Oh,
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
For me, it was Robyn this morning, as she was like, I'm like, okay, yeah, I gotta go do the stream. Okay, cool.
Books or podcasts?
Books. Yeah.
Books.
100% books.
Okay, we've got some agreements here. So now, name me a recent book that you've enjoyed.
I finished Lovecraft Country not too long ago, which is going to be a TV show soon.
Oh.
So I really wanted to read it before I watched it, and it was really good. It's like a bunch of like Lovecraftian style short stories based in America around like Black communities. It's very like big Black Lives Matter type stuff within the Lovecraft universe, which is just such a like interesting take on the whole thing. But it was just a really solid story.
The actual H.P. Lovecraft was in many ways a problematic individual, even though the world that he created was, very enthralling, let's say.
Yeah.
And so, and they were incredibly skilled as a writer. I mean, if you look at some of their books, they managed to spend 3 pages and somehow just tell you absolutely nothing, but do it in an interesting way.
Yeah.
And so you're saying that this Lovecraftian Country, is that the name of the book?
Lovecraft Country, yeah.
Lovecraft Country. So that's taking the same style, the same universe, and the same writing style, presumably, but doing it in a much more positive manner.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. And Elaine?
Probably, I think like the last one that really stuck with me was Harrow the Ninth, which is a science fiction. I guess it's kind of like a science fiction fantasy cross thing. It's a bit of a
gothic type.
Yeah,
stuff.
very very space gothic. It's constantly pitched by their publisher as lesbian necromancers, which I think is selling a bit short. Trying to sell it just on. And it's even contradictory because the character who's overtly gay in it is not actually the necromancer. But it's a very fun sort of gothic sci-fi. I think someone described it as gothic sci-fi Clue with necromancers, where it's like a big
big painful twist at the end as well.
Yeah, of course. There's always the big
Or a controversial twist, perhaps.
controversial twist. I was not too pleased with the twist at the end. Simply for anybody who has read a lot of queer fiction, I don't want to spoil it because it is a very good book, and the character.
You would recommend it to others to read if you're in the market for a book of fiction.
Yes, if you're into your sci-fi fantasy and you want a nice fresh, it's got memes in it, you know.
Okay.
It's got a very modern voice.
Sounds like it's kind of very much a trope-laden, reveling in that kind of geek culture type thing.
I wouldn't call it trope-laden. We're not talking Ready Player One here, where every second sentence is a pop culture reference. It's got its own identity. It's just every now and then they'll slip in like something that tells you it was written by like a young writer, and it's very good. I would highly recommend.
Kind of feel like for me, there's something more jarring about when something's played straight, but then suddenly there's a little real-world reference that pulls you out. Whereas with Ready Player One, at least when it's just reveling in it, and it's like, okay, yeah, there's this cool stuff, most of which I'm familiar with because I absolutely, when I first got into games, I kind of looked back at the whole history, and it's the kind of person that I am, so I'm really all over those retro games. But yeah, that is what it is, if you know what I mean. So I don't know, maybe you can have both. I don't know. I'd have to read it. I've not read it. You've read it. I shouldn't be saying what I think of a book I've not read.
Well, I would highly recommend it.
I would also.
But we are all about the games. Have you played any physical games recently? What was the last one you played, Sam?
You talking like board games, physical board games?
Or actually, if you've played any physical LARPs or RPGs or sports, I don't know if you would have, but or clapping games or party.
I guess apart from playing Adventure Mart with myself, I was on a Soulbound stream that Elaine hosted a couple weeks ago, like the new Warhammer Fantasy RPG from Cubicle 7.
Ooh. Nice.
That was good. I was playing like it's got a very modern like D&D style engine that just lets you play more like a member of the Avengers in like a cinematic style combat where you have like a lot of agency over the narrative of what's going on, rather than crunchy dice rolling type stuff. Yeah.
And Elaine.
Well, obviously I had the Soulbound game. In terms of physical things, I think the last physical game I probably played was it'll be 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, which is it's like a single, I guess you would call it like a solo RPG. So it's got this absolutely, it's the one random thing I don't have on my desk right now. It's got this absolutely delightful hardback, small, like notepad type thing. And it's all about, you roll dice, you flip to sort of like, almost in like a choose your own adventure. But it gives you a prompt for your vampire as your vampire is going through this 1,000-year thing. And it's all about making tough choices because you can only, each time you land on an encounter, you need to like memorize it. It becomes part of your memory, but your vampire can only hold so many memories. So after like a couple of 100 years, you have to start forgetting things and scoring things off. And it's this kind of really enjoyable tale of like loss and making these horrible decisions. And you can like slowly but surely lose your humanity and become more cursed and stuff. And it's all, I really wish I had the book on me because the book itself is like a work of art. Everything is clippings from newspapers and all this sort of stuff to really make it feel like you've got this object that's fallen out of a 1,000-year-old vampire's pocket. And it's just a very wonderfully immersive, like creative, it gets the creative juices flowing, I guess is kind of the thing. And I believe you can get a PDF copy for fairly cheap on itch right now as well. The physical book itself is quite hard to come by. I know they did like a secondary printing, but yeah. So
And that does sound like, definitely there's something lovely about the tactile nature of a physical book as opposed to just reading it through the PDF. There's something lovely about that artifact, especially when people take a lot of care over it. I played one game yesterday, which was physically, it was using the L deck. I played Reassemble, which was one of the 2020 design contests. It was, a one-player game, and it has a major issue, which is that, if you say there's 3 words, basically the issue is that the middle and the end aren't quite at the same difficulty level, if you know what I mean. So it's not like, it ramps up. It's just, okay, you've got this whole bit where you're turning the... so you start off with everything in columns of individual letters, and then you've got to reassemble it so that everything's in columns of the individual suits. And each time you're picking something up from the bottom of a column by making a word with all those cards and then putting it down. Now, the thing is that it's easier the shorter words you make. So you're always incentivized to do whatever the minimum word length is, because then you're able to move 1, potentially, or 2 cards at a time. So after a while, I was like, okay, let's try 3 cards minimum. And then I played it, and then Layla played it. And for me, morning, Alex. It's lovely to see you. We're just talking about Reassemble. Well, I was talking about Reassemble. Sorry about this tangent, Elaine and Sam. But 3 cards minimum, it was fairly easy during the game. And then at the end, it was a slightly tricky puzzle. That was like, okay, now that those final few cards, because I have to move 3 all at once, how do I make it so, okay, I've got to... It's almost like a Tower of Hanoi type thing, where you move something away from where you want it to be just so you can move it back, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then I did 4 cards minimum, and again, the middle of the game was like, okay, this is fairly easy, and then the end was like, oh wow, I just cannot do it. And then I stared at it I got through like 95% of the game in 20 minutes, and then I left the end bits. I was like, okay, I'm just going to try it tomorrow. I left it overnight. I stared at it the next morning. This was yesterday morning. I took a few more turns, tried to ponder it. So I was like, yeah, I just can't work out how to do this. And so it was, that. Have you ever come into a design that has that sort of problem where it's kind of finishing off the final few cards or something, making that final jump to make it work? It's got some real difficulty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like the last game I had that experience with was Gloomhaven, because for anyone who's played Gloomhaven, it's got a rather interesting action economy, where like you're using your deck of cards to do actions, but those actions are also moving around the dungeon and things like that. And you can, when you run out of cards, it's game over essentially. And it was one of these like massive boss battles and it was Robyn and I were playing it together. And after about an hour and a half of fighting this boss battle, which is a lot of moving little figures around and setting up the dungeon and all this sort of stuff, we ran out. We were like, I think we needed like 1 more card. We're like, if any of us can move right now, can we move? No. Ran out of cards, failed the dungeon. And with Gloomhaven, it's just like, okay, well, you have to restart the dungeon. And that was it. Absolutely killed our enjoyment of Gloomhaven, because we're just like, well, we don't want to have to set up the game and play again for 2 hours because we were 1 card short. And yeah, so I think that's probably the closest thing, because we essentially packed the game away and said, well, maybe come back to it. And that was 1.5 years ago. Yeah. So that dungeon is still unfinished. It's probably the closest sort of comparative example.
Yeah, there's something that you want almost feels like a game. If a game is going to make you lose, especially with a cooperative game, this feels like a whole argument that we should spend an hour talking about at what point should a game just chuck you out, because there's something analogous to, okay, player elimination in a co-op kind of having people lose. I know that there's people who say, actually, I would prefer to be eliminated than just, let's not go down that rabbit hole. I will try to remember to. So let's rush through the remaining questions, which I have put into the private chat. So hopefully you've got a bit of a warning for these. So, favorite color to play?
Blue.
Red.
Cards or cubes?
Cards.
Cards.
Wooden meeple or plastic figurine?
Wooden meeple, probably, unless the figurine is like intensely detailed.
Wooden meeple, better for the environment.
Okay, I'll skip the next one. When you're stacking your games, do you put them horizontally or vertically?
A bit of both, looking at my shelf. Just whatever I can better fit into the hole that the shelf allows.
Whichever is more aesthetically pleasing.
Okay, do you prefer rules design, or do you prefer content creation? Like, by content creation, I mean the specific cards, not the development, but just coming up with those effects and the individual cards design, or the overall arching rules?
If I can come up with rules that help me support more content design, content creation, I prefer that for sure.
I think I prefer the rules creation. I'm very good with the big ideas and the large scope, but when it gets down to the nitty gritty of, okay, now make 50 card effects, I slump in my chair and go, Sam.
Art or rules?
Rules, I think. Yeah.
Art. Rules can be art.
True.
Okay, I meant visual arts.
But yes, probably art still. Aesthetic.
Probably still rules for me as well.
And Alex said, you know, I think there's a point at which everyone just mixes it up. Yeah, at some points, space appears or a game appears that just throws everything into whack. Now, can you tell me 3 games that you love?
I'm a big Magic player.
Magic the Gathering, yep.
Yes. I love Magic. I am maybe not in love with it right now, but I'll always love it. I really love Seven Wonders. If I can get 7 people around a table, that's when it's at its best, I think. And I'll be cheap and say that Adventure Mart. I love it for sure.
That's fair.
Yeah. Barring our own titles, otherwise I would just be like Familiar Alchemy, Adventure Mart, Doomsday Bots. Outer Rim, Star Wars Outer Rim was like a massive hit for me, because it's like the perfect blend of storytelling and mechanics. I'm a huge one for story at the table. I always like my games to tell a story. So Star Wars Outer Rim, Escape the Dark Castle, and I've got Escape the Dark Sector waiting to get played. But again, heavily narrative based. Really enjoy that. Oh gosh, third game.
Anything you're enjoying recently? Or in the past year?
I'll probably like throw down and say Age of Sigmar Soulbound, the tabletop RPG, and that's not. I've had a hand in writing that, but also just it's a system that's very narrative focused and less crunchy than a lot of other systems, and lets you make people feel like goddamn heroes at a time when we're all feeling pretty stepped upon. Is my kind of my feeling about it.
Now, I'd like to finish off the questionably quick questions here, because and then ask you the one that doesn't have to be quick at all, which is, how has a typical day been for you recently? And just also, yeah, let's check in, how are you generally with everything that's going on, if you know what I mean?
Do you want to start with that one, Sam?
Sure, yeah. Mine's pretty simple. I get up, I drive to work, and I do my work for 8.5 hours, and then I'll come home and either collapse in bed for a while, or just sit down at the PC and get like writing or working on whatever I'm just doing at the time. And living food-wise, usually through Lidl, or more takeaways than usual, just because it's easy.
And it can be a lot of energy to actually cook stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Can I ask, so are you living on your own, Sam?
Yeah.
Do you know Ward Road?
Ward Road. I've heard the name. I don't know.
It's the one with the NatWest Bank on it. Never mind. So I was just going to ask, what is your work?
I'm a draftsman and CNC programmer. So I do a lot of AutoCAD work, programming for like laser machines to cut steel and stuff like that. It sounds interesting. It's really boring. It's like
I was going to say it sounds very specialist.
Yeah, I guess so.
Lasers.
And I mean, but you're generally feeling okay with life.
Yeah. Even with like the pandemic and stuff, like I work in an office pretty much by myself these days, programming stuff. So, a lot of days are like wake up, go look at bad screen, come home, look at good screen, and then sleep. And we're still getting like a lot of stuff done and design work and like, just trying to kind of like stay focused on DigiSprite stuff and writing and things like that. I've been getting a lot of stuff done, I think, over the lockdown period.
Elaine, how's everything been for you recently? What's a typical day like, would you say?
For myself, crawl out of bed sometime between 10 and 11, like a lazy work from home person. I've been working from home for a few years now. I work remotely anyway. I crawl out of bed, caffeinate myself, plonk myself down at a computer, because I make my own hours. Because I have too many jobs, is the thing I always say. So I have 9 to 5 game design for a company that's like a remote, like sort of global company, and then I have
7?
No, that's X Team.
Okay.
I do a lot of they're like a massive team of software devs, and I'm on board as a game designer for them, and I sort of like run lots of community events and things like that. It's a very fun company. So that's like my 9 to 5, and then when that wraps up for the day, when I've done my bits and pieces, I'll go on to either DigiSprite work, which is obviously the board game dev and things like that, or Cubicle 7 work, because I'm doing freelance tabletop RPG writing. So that's for like the Warhammer licenses and things like that. Or I will do some like lowest on the totem pole right now, because it's the unpaid work, I guess, is some fiction writing for myself, like just personal writing projects and things like that. So I'm kind of like rocking like 4 jobs right now, which is a bit much, I will admit. But I can't say no to work. It's my biggest problem. I'm just like,
but that's pretty awesome. I mean, if you are, actually getting a wage to do things, that is basically living the dream, it seems like.
I certainly can't complain. I can't complain at all.
I'm speaking of someone else who works a lot. Calvin Wong.
How's the stinky drain baby today, Calvin?
And I would like to start off with talking about what we're talking about, then like maybe talk about each other a bit, like Elaine, what's your favorite thing about Sam?
Is that the question right now?
Yeah, sure.
Probably he's like the best person I've ever met for just bouncing ideas off of. Like we always tend to meet up like at least once a week for some form of like you can't see it, but just off screen from Sam's camera angle is the world's largest whiteboard, which is on wheels. It is a cataclysmically massive thing. And most of our sort of creative endeavors at some point start on that whiteboard when we're chilling out on a Friday post work with like some form of coffee or whatever, and just like, okay, cool, I've got an idea for a short story, I've got an idea for a novel, board game or something, and it's up there, and we're just like creating
all
ideas.
These ideas just pouring.
Yeah.
So apparently the Stinky Drain Baby is having a big snooze by the window, which we've taped shut.
For context, for anyone who missed it, Calvin's cat Kazrak went missing for like 24 hours and was eventually just wandered up to Calvin after having spent way too long sleeping in drains and causing no end of worry. So
if you follow Calvin on Twitter, you can like literally read the entire story of this event. It's very very detailed.
I'm waiting for the Disney adaptation.
Really happy to hear that Kazrak's come back. That was, happy to hear. So awesome. But yeah, we'll get into some Elaine love, and it did feel like a bit longer than 24 hours. We'll get into some Elaine love and some Robyn love, kind of talking about, what each person brings to the team, how you met, and with the advantages of working together, maybe some of the potential pitfalls, and then we'll wrap up. That feels like a vaguely thingy format, if you know what I mean. So let's start from the start. How did you meet?
Through Evertate's like video game design course. We both did a single year of video games technology, which is sort of the programming course, and then we kind of shifted out of that and did a single year of, or I did a single year of video game design stuff and producing and stuff like that. Elaine went the whole way after that, but we still kind of kept in touch. I sort of dropped out and went back home and did a draftsman apprenticeship type thing.
So did you kind of realize that it just wasn't quite for you?
Yeah, I think it's taken me until doing DigiSprite stuff to figure out the best way that I want to and can make games. And even like I'm kind of glad that it's kind of ended up like that, because the video game industry seems like a big old mess right now.
It's certainly got problems.
But we always just kind of like played games with each other for like ages. We kind of had like consistent like fads and fascinations going on. Like we'd play like Old More Time for like 6 months and then shift to something else. We played, I remember, I think one of the longest ones was Monster Hunter U Ultimate.
Ultimate.
The one that came out on the Wii U.
Yeah.
Which is the only reason that both of us bought that console, and that's the only game that we played on it. So yeah, and then like I just kind of tried to move down to Dundee full time from back home, and then we kind of just got into like writing and stuff, and then Robyn came along, and we ended up kind of shifting into board games and stuff after that.
And how did Robyn enter the picture?
Through OkCupid, technically. So I started dating Robyn. Oh gosh, my brain is blanking on the exact year. I started dating Robyn, and things went well and everything. Robyn already had DigiSprite as a company, and that was a company she started when she was in university for doing web development and like some video games and things like that. So eventually Robyn moved in, and this was a point where myself, Sam, and Robyn were all staying together in Sam's flat. and Robyn was working on a card game, a digital card game prototype for like a roguelike dungeon crawling type thing. And she was getting on well with it, but I remember one day she was like frustrated because when you're trying to do like a digital card game, everything takes so much more effort. It's like, okay, when you're designing a physical game, you can say, okay, draw 3 cards and then like place 2 cards here, do this thing or whatever, and then you as the computer just do the thing. But when you're doing a digital card game, all that stuff needs to be automated. It all needs to be coded. So I was struggling like with rapid prototyping for this thing, and I was like, why don't you just physically prototype it? Why don't we just sit down with paper and make this game? And I think by the end of the night, we essentially had a fully working prototype for what eventually turned out to be Doomsday Bots. And that was when Robyn, Sam, and I were all just kind of chilling out in the living room, and we're like, we should just make this as a board game. Just do it as a card game. It's so much easier. That way we have the mechanics and everything. We can hire an artist, which ended up being Ori Studios, which is an artist guild out of Indonesia.
And Robyn chased funding and stuff as well.
Yeah, Robyn chased funding from Scottish Enterprise.
Yeah.
Which was like our cash injection for getting that first game, like the prototypes done, and the art done. And then we took it to Kickstarter.
Robyn's really great at just like getting stuff done.
Oh yeah.
Wow. I assume that's Robyn in the comments.
Yes, Robyn is right in there right now.
So Alex asked about whether Unity would be a good way to start making a digital version. Which, do you have any strong...
Yeah, Unity is a very good platform just for a lot of indie development right now as it is. It's got fairly good licenses and use cases. It's very, very common, so you can find a lot of help, a lot of platforms, frameworks, and things like that. I myself have kind of tapped out of a lot of the software dev. I did work in the video games industry for a long time, but I've moved out of there for now, and I was never super heavy on the tech side, so I can't speak to technical prowess or expertise, but I do know that Unity is quite an industry standard for a lot of like indie dev card games and things like that. Look at something like I'm not going to start naming games because I'll get some wrong. I was about to say I think Slay the Spire is Unity, but honestly I can't quite remember now that I'm saying.
A lot made with it, I know. Going back to how you
prototype before you go digital, or you'll end up just doing so much work. Make sure the game works on paper before you go digital. Is my biggest recommendation.
I mean, certainly, I think there are some things that are going to be, just as there are some things that you could not play as a video game. I mean, people have asked me, hey, have you thought of an app version of In a Bind or Yogi? And I'm like, I don't know if you've played my game, Yogi.
No, I haven't. Actually. Every time we're at con together, I'm always like, you're always just on the other side of a hall somewhere, and I'm always like, we should go over and play, and then we end up like stuck with.
No, it's always the way, and certainly when you're there at a convention, you're there to kind of show off your own things. It's just the nature of how things are. But so like, you know, the cards tell you things like 1 finger touching nose, 1 finger touching ear, 2 hands touching, hands on a knee, this card on your head, and then you still need to draw your next card. Now, you could have it as an app, but like having the cards down, you know, tell you what to do. It's like, what would an app actually bring to that game? I mean, okay, I can see the utility in an app for Ticket to Ride, because okay, it's something where you can play it theoretically on a train carriage without needing the big board game. Or I could see even more, although we kind of started playing that, and then I was like, yeah, I'm not enjoying this. I can't see it when it's other people's turns because we're passing this thing around. This kind of feels completely pointless, and I'd rather just play Love Letter a bunch more, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Love Letter. Anyway, my point is like, yeah, a digital version, something like Dominion. Okay, it takes out the shuffling. That's kind of nice. Something where there's a lot of, it adds some utility. Okay, it adds being able to play it on your own, okay, that's great. But just as there are games that could possibly be on both, but there are some games that could only be on one, I think. Something like Portal, for example, or any real-time game, which is all about like Twitch gameplay, like an old-style vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up, for example. I mean, I don't think there would have been much points in making a paper prototype of Ikaruga, for example.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, for sure. When I say make a paper prototype first, I mean if you're making a card game. Even card games, though, like there are certain things. I know we had a conversation about this back when we were working on Doomsday Bots, I think, but we were talking about Hearthstone at the time and how Hearthstone uses the digital format in some interesting ways. Which card was it? There was one that pulled cards from I can't remember. You know better.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to get is like there's a lot of cards in Hearthstone and other digital card games, or like specifically digital card games that create other cards. And because like you don't have to, and also like introduces like the randomness of that into it as well. Like there's a whole discover mechanic in Hearthstone that's like whenever you play a creature or something, it's like discover a spell, and then it'll just pull a bunch of spells out of a huge database of cards that you don't need to own or collect or anything, and just like puts them up on the screen, and you get to kind of change that. And then stuff like just changing cards statistics like permanently. I think there's a bunch of new cards in Hearthstone that are like give all the creatures in your deck +1/+1, and like that's like a permanent change to that card and for that game specifically. And like you can kind of do stuff like that in paper games like Magic and stuff, but you've got to kind of like mentally remember that is the thing. Whereas in Hearthstone, you make that permanent change and you don't have to remember it. You can just focus on sort of like maximizing your board state in the way that you want to do it, rather than having to like layer the rules engine on top of your head at the same time.
Definitely embracing that random number element. And yeah, so you had met Elaine, you met Robyn. You kind of feel like the common link here. It's like you're the person who met Sam, and you're also the person who met Robyn. So everyone kind of met through you.
A lot of my other kind of current friends I've met through Elaine as well. She's kind of like the social nexus for a lot of people, I think.
It's what I'm often called, is the social nexus. You should play like 7 Degrees of Elaine, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Because I think like Stephanie Bolin, who did all of the lovely art for Adventure Mart. I met her back when I was working in the video games industry as well. Things like that. So sometimes it's just about luck and meeting people.
So just to clarify, so for Doomsday Bots, Robyn had a game idea. Elaine, you said, okay, how about we paper prototype it? And then we're like, oh, actually, this is fun as a card game. And then you said, hey, I know this other person, Sam. And Sam and I were kind of chatting, and you were already working with Sam on games speculatively at that point?
Sort of like spare time, right?
Yeah.
And then you were like, okay, Doomsday Bots works well. Let's finish up the development of this and let's make this an actual project together.
Yeah.
So let's start off with some love for Robyn, if we can. So Sam, you've already gone into this. Like Robyn just gets stuff done, like kind of applying. Yeah. But what else? Let's hear what else does Robyn bring to the team.
I'm engaged to her, so I feel like I should not be allowed to sing praise because it'll all just be like, I love her eyes. Oh my god. So I'm gonna let Sam take this one.
I think you need to say at least one nice. Okay, Elaine, you try to think of something.
Oh,
surely. Work specific if you can.
She's now glaring at me. I gotta be careful what I say. For me, it's always I am a pessimist by nature. I'm very like, ooh, are you sure we should do that? Can we do that? That's quite a risk. I think it just comes from working as a producer for so long. I'm always weighing the risks and being like, it could bite us in the butt. Like, are you sure you want to invest like £250 or something in this like piece of art or this thing or whatever? But Robyn is like kind of like the antithesis to that. Like she's very, very like, we should just do it. We'll try it. And she's very very, very good with that sort of thing. So she kind of counters me in a lot of those ways. If left to my own devices, I would probably stand at the edge of the curb and sort of like hum and haw and not be sure, whereas Robyn will just charge across the road type thing, and I'm like, oh god, okay. And I have to, my job much more becomes managing risk as it's happening rather than being paralyzed by the potential for failure. So that's probably where I feel like Robyn counters that.
Nice. So, anything else you want to add, Sam?
Yeah, I think to sort of expand on my point from earlier, throughout like Adventure Mart development, when my head was like stuck in the game engine for like the entire time, Robyn just really got stuff done and made sure that like the whole project was kind of being pushed forward on like an administrative business kind of level, and just like contact with other people, setting stuff up. Like DigiSprite wouldn't exist without Robyn doing a lot of the backbone work of setting up meetings, organizing everything. And I don't know if like personally for her it's like a bit of a dredge to get it done, or if it's like something that she revels in, but she's really good at it.
Got Colvin, who's quite surprised that you're a pessimist, Elaine. I guess you just don't give that impression. But it's quite often the case that people do have these hidden things, and
I guess for me, it's part of. I only know Robyn from Tiny Plants on Twitter. Oh, she'll be delighted. She loves her plants. You can see there's like a succulent nursery happening over here above my shoulder and everything. Can you see these up here? And there's also this enormous. You can't really see it because it's being obliterated by the light. But there's a pepper plant there, which has the biggest peppers on it right now.
Robyn's plant love. It was kind of like the whole thing that started Familiar Alchemy, really.
Yeah, true.
That was her goal, was to make a game that's like very into plants.
So, let's talk about Sam, which is kind of, unfortunately, this is totally against what I'm inferring from Colvin's comments, which is that we should get you to talk more, Sam. But Elaine, can you talk about Sam and how amazing Sam is?
Oh gosh, I mean, what more is
there? We've already talked a little bit about this, so I mean,
I feel like in terms of, so obviously from like a personal level of like the idea bouncing and all that sort of stuff, and it's always like we spur each other on to do more creative and better things and hone skills. From an actual just, hey, Sam as like lead designer at DigiSprite, it's like anytime for fun, Sam used to make PowerPoints describing and like lectures. Remember the Raw Deal lecture, Sam?
Yes, I do.
Which was like, hey, here's this old card game that is I have dissected and every mechanic, and here are the amazing things about it that I love, and this is why I want to make a thing. And that's what you used to do for fun. Anytime if we're sort of like thinking about designs, especially for card games, if we're thinking designs and things like that and mechanics and whatnot, it always feels like it's very safe if it's in Sam's hands, because Sam's he's got like the card brain, the wizard brain to be able to say, what about this mechanic from this dead card game, or no, that won't work because blah blah blah. Even with like Adventure Mart, Sam's intrinsic encyclopedic knowledge of every tiny cog that's happening in that game engine is ridiculous. So yes, the Sam brain. But there you go. I can see Sam slowly shrinking because he doesn't take compliments very well.
Sam, could you talk about Elaine for a bit?
Well, Elaine is definitely better at doing things than she thinks she is able to.
Oh no, it's getting real.
That's one of the big things. Try and just like keep Elaine spurred along onto doing things, and believing in herself, because she is much better at doing things than she thinks she is. What else?
I feel like we need some Gurren Lagann, like
Yeah,
hype anime music or something right now.
Don't believe in yourself. Believe in the me that believes in you.
Yeah,
Something
there you go.
right?
Elaine, don't stop believing.
Oh God.
Let go.
But yeah,
Elaine's got a brain knowledge as well from like all your youth years deep in like Warhammer, tabletop games, miniatures games, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of our other fascinations, we went into like Kill Team for a while, like Warhammer 40k Kill Team, and Elaine just trounced everybody because she's got like I don't know, she's got like a some kind of Eldritch D6 in her head. She just understands how sixes are rolled and like she's a very big like dice brain. If I've got the card brain, then Elaine's got like the miniatures games in her head, and in more recent years like RPGs and stuff as well. Like you can break D&D pretty easily, and that has on other theoretical occasions.
I guess that's I got that dice brain.
And so we've touched upon how you all met. I mean, do you think that you need to be friends or people who know each other well? Do you think that is going to naturally lead to the best collaborations? Because I don't want to just talk about people who are working with each other in a kind of freelance manner, because I've been working with other people for Stuff by Bez since, well, if you include playtesting that I've done, then obviously there's more people than I could count. Well, it's not that I can't count that high, it's just that I haven't kept track. But, certainly for In a Bind, there, or Yogi as it's now called. Sorry, I should, here's one version of it, which is the Baltic version. But yeah, it feels like there were so many people who did the playtesting. Then for Wibble++, I got I'm blanking on the name, Rachel Mortimer to do proofreading. And recently in the past year, I've started getting other people to do a little bit of work, and you've done even more of that with getting other people to do your art, or and of course we both pay other people to do our manufacturing. That's not something that either of us do personally. But rather than work for hire, there's a big difference between work for hire and true collaboration. Would you not agree? Where you're kind of all in the one team, we're all kind of going to basically share this free ways or whatever, even if you say, okay, Jamie Stegmeyer's got Alan Stone beside them, and that's a full-time partner. And to talk about second full-time employee, it feels, disingenuous is a strong word. Maybe that's unkind. But it is worth remembering that, Jamie Stegmeyer isn't, the only person at Stonemaier Games, and there is, Alan Stone, and we've had a chat about that, how Alan Stone is so important to Stonemaier Games. It's half the name. Certainly, it wouldn't be Stonemaier Games if it wasn't for them. And having your Robyn, who's doing the businessy stuff, Elaine, who's kind of maybe keeping things in check, but has this amazing breadth of knowledge from working with other companies, and Sam, you're coming from it with this analytical point of view, but then you're all working together and you're all super invested. Yeah, how would you define the difference between someone who's freelancing and someone who's actually collaborating with you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I see what you're getting at. It's a weird one, because especially with Adventure Mart and Familiar Alchemy and things like that, we like to, because the one thing that we're sort of missing in our sort of like full-time, I say full-time, but our sort of like super invested sort of people, is we don't have any artists. Like neither Sam, Robyn, or I are artists, so that's always an area where we look outside. But when we're looking for an artist, we try to look for someone who, and we give them a lot of freedom to express themselves. Like with Adventure Mart, I went to Steph, and we didn't really have, we had like kind of an art style in mind. We're like, oh, it'd be quite nice to be cute and stuff, but we said to Steph, but we want it to be your art. We want it to be like your spin on things and whatnot. And the same with Monique and Familiar Alchemy. Because Monique worked with us on Adventure Mart, but she also did a lot of more like fantastical realist stuff. And we said, hey, we're having this game. It's about like Scottish mythology and like alchemy and things like that. But we want you to explore the style and do what you want to do. So we do try to have that sort of, we're not just handing them a folio with a design doc and saying make it look like this, because that's not, it doesn't feel as exciting for us. We like to sort of give our artists freedom in that regard. But yeah, there's always going to be a slight difference when you're like bringing people on, especially considering like all three of us still live within the same city, so we meet up. Pre-COVID, we would physically meet up at least once a week to do what we would call our DigiSprite Dev Day, which was normally a Sunday, and we come together and pitch ideas, work on things, play test games and everything.
Are you getting to that point once again that you can do it now?
Hopefully, I mean.
Yeah, through like a lot of Familiar Alchemy was designed through playtesting in Tabletop Simulator. And I think definitely, depending on how the world goes, any like designs I'm kind of thinking of these days, I definitely have like digital playtesting in mind in case we need to keep going that way. But yeah, we definitely try and meet up on the regular still, like even online for doing stuff.
Now, I've got one question, which is, so on Board Game Geek, you're credited designer as DigiSprite. Is the idea that you want to have this identity as a studio, who were the people who made Villainous? But where you basically have agreed that you're not going to have individual credits.
Oh, credits.
Because that's the reason why I had you on originally. And I had this, idea where I chatted to Robyn, where it would be a kind of series of literally everyone involved with the game, which would be a long list. But I reached out to the illustrators, and they said that they weren't available, unfortunately, to do something. And I know you three said that you weren't so keen to do it, but it's a totally separate conversation, and it's something that maybe I'll do for Seize the Power, because, obviously that's kind of partially by me, but I can sure that ITB will kind of, if I pitch it earlier, we can, but yeah. How important are these credits? How much credit do you want to give to all the playtesters? And is that something that was deliberate, that on Board Game Geek you are credited only as DigiSprite?
Yeah, so we have like there's sort of like the internal and external sort of way of doing things. So we always have like our credits section in any rulebook. And the way we currently sort of do design on things is that we've sort of, because we go into like our sort of pre-dev period where we're all like, okay, we each come up with pitches for games, whether it's like Doomsday Bots or Adventure Mart or like various other things, or Familiar Alchemy. And essentially whoever one of us tends to take like the lead on that, and they're like lead designer on that project. So like Sam was lead designer on Adventure Mart, so it was like 100% his baby. Robyn has been lead design on Familiar Alchemy because it's 100% her baby. We've got the upcoming Adventure Mart tabletop role-playing game, and I'll be lead design on that because that's my wheelhouse, that's my baby. So we have like, we acknowledge our own sort of, for each project, who's the lead on that, and everyone else is like pitching in with design and things like that. So when we find that like on the likes of Board Game Geek, etc., because we all do pitch in with design, that it's sort of, it would be disingenuous for us to say for most of them that, oh, the designer is just Sam or just Robyn or just myself. And so we always are just like DigiSprite designers, job done.
None of our ideas would exist without them being bounced off one another within our like little triumvirate.
Yeah,
I guess there's something lovely there, and I know, so it was Prospero Hall who did all the Villainous and I believe Funko Pop and stuff, and it feels like you're coming from a very similar point of view where it's like, okay, we're going to all work to, just after I said that. Where you're all working together, and maybe it takes the ego a little bit out of it, but of course Prospero Hall actually just credit Prospero Hall even in the rulebook, whereas you do have individual names in your rulebook. What was the decision behind that, individualizing yourselves in the rulebook then?
I think it's just a degree of granularity, right?
It was also kind of hub games. Are you talking about like the rules for Adventure Mart specifically?
Yeah, I think I've seen a tiny bit of that. I've not actually seen the rule sheet for Doomsday Bots, let alone Familiar Alchemy, so I have no idea how the credits page looks for that.
For Adventure Mart, hub games kind of like curated the rulebook towards the end, and they kind of wanted to put like who was the lead designer on this thing in the credits, and that's kind of how that came apart. But I think since then it's kind of like Elaine was saying, we're into this kind of system where one of us kind of takes the charge on a project, and I think it's very good to have that like one person have the vision of it in their head from like start to finish.
And if you were to go back, do you think you would have wanted to, and for future projects, do you think you would always want to say, okay, Robyn's the lead for Familiar Alchemy, Elaine's the lead for this, Sam's the lead for this, or would you want to move towards a model where it's like, okay, we are Megatron, if you know what I mean, like we are Team DigiSprite, we all work together and kind of, just presenting yourselves as a more unified thing?
I think it just depends on how things go. I mean, like, it's not the type of thing that you need to set in stone. Because for me, it is all about sort of granularity. There's degrees of interest in who made the game and things like that. Like one of the big heartbreaking things we see a lot with reviews of Adventure Mart is you get like a lot of reviewers who will essentially, the only shout out they'll do in their review is the publisher. Because that's they're only interested in the top level. They're not interested necessarily in the making of the game. So they'll shout out like, "Oh, this is Adventure Mart by Hub Games," which is fine because Hub Games published it, and it wouldn't be distributed as widely if it wasn't. But things like Adventure Mart was like 95% complete when we signed on with Hub Games. So when you have this like really awesome in-depth review, and we don't get any mention even as DigiSprite or whatever, that's kind of heartbreaking. And then, but then you'll get people who are more into the development, and they'll shout out potentially. Yes, Calvin is a big one on this one as well. Like proper credit where it's due. I don't like to, because it comes down to what the individual reviewers are interested in.
There's always a degree of kind of, I mean, if you look up any of my roles, they're on my Google sheet for the L deck. You can sort of going to look up, let's say, categorical, and then, yeah, it's, so this is the rules document. So this is, I need to replace these with images, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So this is going to be replaced with a little diagram here, but basically the rules are one page. Now on the other side, okay, you've got extra bits and the credits history. Okay, I did this, Tom did this, this is how Tom made it, and then David Brain popped in along the way, and but there's blind testers and rules written by other people and proofreading. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. If I go to, I'm trying to, yep, so Fable, there's some, yeah, there's obviously, I just feel like you can talk about exactly how it was made and giving reference to, if I go to Wibble actually, sorry, these Google documents really confuse me, because you click back and then it goes properly backwards. So credits history. So Gil Hova made Prolix, and yeah, that inspired the game, and these are the key people, and it's kind of a when you've got a story like that, you can more clearly say, hey, this is what each person did, because okay, you've got 2 illustrators listed, but who did what? I don't know.
I actually really like that, to be honest. It's sort of like the acknowledgements section at the end of the book, where you get to kind of acknowledge people that contributed to the project, but in like a sort of narrative kind of way.
Yeah, I do think to continue my point, I guess it kind of just comes down to the people who are interested in the game. It comes down to how interested they are in how it was made. I think the example I like to use is it's actually very common in the video games industry as well. People will say, oh, this is an EA game. And EA is the publisher. And like the developer, again, is kind of gone. But then think about, gosh, okay, let's pick a random big AAA game, Horizon Zero Dawn. Who did the concept art for Horizon Zero Dawn? Who was the artist that designed this iconic character? You know, and these names are obfuscated by various layers, so that when it comes to the review stage, most people are just like, oh, it was made by this publisher or whatnot. It takes people like, say, for example, NoClip, or a YouTube channel, who are incredibly good at doing a deep dive on how a game was made. And those are like incredibly rewarding, obviously, for the people working on it.
For the video games industry, you've got Moby Games, which I understand is quite good at crediting literally everyone involved in the creation of that. Very similar to IMDb for movies. And Board Game Geek is the closest that we've got to something like that, but it doesn't quite go far enough. There's a lot of arguments for. I mean, for example, it's basically designer, artist, and I think publisher is the yeah, so yeah, designer, artist, and publisher. And also, I mean, as DigiSprite, was DigiSprite the publisher? I mean, I understand that you got a lot of stuff set up, but it feels a bit wrong to kind of call DigiSprite the publisher when you didn't do the distribution or that sorts of stuff.
For Adventure Mart, yeah, we didn't do distribution and whatnot. For Doomsday Bots and for Familiar Alchemy and stuff, we'll be a publisher though. So
Sure.
you can sit within multiple
But
wheelhouses.
certainly DigiSprite is listed as a publisher on BoardGameGeek. And if I saw that and I was unfamiliar with it, I would assume that means that there's two versions of it, one published by DigiSprite and one published by Hub Games.
Okay.
That's what I would assume looking at it. Although I'm aware that there are situations where it's kind of sub-licensed by someone else kind of finances it. And so, for example, actually this version means that on BoardGameGeek, Yogi would be published by Brain Games as one of the things, as well as Gigamic, because in this instance, Gigamic basically said to all these companies around the world, hey, as long as you buy 10,000 copies, you can have a license for your territory to publish this game, but it's kind of like a co-publishing deal. And there's so much nuance to that because you've got co-publishing, you've got, okay, someone who's getting something ready for someone else in your situation where it was like almost at the end stage, and it's not like there was a lot more product design, because at least here, okay, they added PVC cards and card holders, which is pretty cool, which is not something I would ever have had the money to do. But actually, let me take a step back, and we're talking about Adventure Mart a lot, so what exactly did Hub Games bring to the table?
For that, they brought a lot of obviously like the connections, the distribution, and like various feedback and things like that. Rory and Michael and everyone were good for like playing the games and giving their opinions on it and things like that. And they had like some in-house designers who did the layout for the rulebook.
Okay,
bits and pieces like that, were like their primary thing.
So the rules were completely relayed out by them.
Yeah, well, we didn't have a physical rulebook because we were on Kickstarter at the time. We had like our Google Docs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then we were signed on with them, so they put together the rulebook and things like that.
And so certainly, it sounds like there was a little bit of development done, but there it was mainly tapping into their distribution network was the main advantage, and their reach.
Yeah, because obviously as like a small 3-person indie team in Scotland working off of Kickstarter games and things like that, when like a company that has this like much larger distribution network comes out and like it's like, hey, we want to sell your game and stuff, like that's very cool and it's very good. And I think Adventure Mart, obviously, like we mentioned earlier, got the reach that it got because of Hub Games and marketing and distribution and things like that, which we don't have. We don't have those things necessarily. Not right now.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I mean, it feels like there's something. So this is kind of the studio model where, okay, you fall into bed with a publisher and, okay, you're working together for this one thing, and then we're getting these people together for this one thing. Presumably for those artists, it was a payment per piece of art that they were doing, also based on the complexity of the level of art and whatnot. It was pretty much a flat fee. Whereas for yourselves, it was much more a labor of love, but at this point, there's presumably been some, we don't need to get into the specifics of the numbers, but presumably there's been some sort of advance, and you're going to get some royalties down the line, and if Hub Games hadn't done it within X years, then you would have gotten the rights back, and you'd be like, oh, well, that sucks, but at least we'll do it ourselves. Is that, broadly speaking, correct?
Yeah, broadly speaking.
Yeah, for the most part, when we made the deal, like we made sure that we have like entire kind of control over the Adventure Mart IP, I guess you would kind of say it that way.
Nice.
So DigiSprite we own all the art and all of the everything pretty much for Adventure Mart, and that's kind of how we wanted it, to make sure that if anything more happens in the DigiSprite universe, we can kind of keep control of it all, and there's no kind of mess that way. That's kind of how we're able to do like the tabletop RPG, just kind of off our own backs, because we own all the stuff. We can take all that art and slap it in a completely different product and get it going, without having any kind of like red tape or anything to wade through and stuff like that.
Yeah, like to be clear, Hub Games have been great for those sort of things. They're aware of how important IP ownership is. It could very well have come to a stage where, you know, you do hear tales of independent designers getting strong-armed into contracts that are not good for them in the long run. And Hub Games have been great. And they are also very good at giving credits. When Hub Games are like talking about the game, they do talk about us, and they talk about like the story of meeting us and that sort of stuff. Whenever I say that it's heartbreaking missing out on like reference or credit, it tends to be from like the top level, like the reviewer level, where they just see the Hub Games logo on the box and it's okay, Hub Games made this and things like that. That's where it gets a little bit heartbreaking. But it's all just levels of granularity.
I mean, again, I would kind of say that for me, I think it is fine, because as someone who's seen many reviews of Yogi where my name is never mentioned, you know, it's, yeah, I feel like, okay, it's always nice when people are like, oh, you made that game and that's the game that I actually enjoy, then that's like the most amazing thing. But if
doesn't that like
people go in as deep as they want, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
people
that's what I
can't
mean.
spend time. I can't spend time looking at I'm looking at this bottle and thinking, okay, who designed this bottle? Because there was a lot of work that went into this bottle. I'm just randomly picking up this bottle because it's what I'm drinking water from right now. But okay, who designed the curvature of this? What was the history of, you know, having these little bits so that, you know, there's a lot of work that went into that plastic bottle. And, you know, as consumers, we ignore all of that. And even when it comes to a game, you know, there's at least, you know, most of the games that are right there beside me, you know, I couldn't tell you the designer off the top of my head.
But isn't that sad? Should we not do better as people, though? The other analogy I used was, it's like, it's as if you saw a review for a movie that only spoke about the studio that made it and not the director, not the actors on screen and things like that. I feel like as reviewers and as consumers, we can do better and we should do better at knowing who made the things, especially when art is involved.
Work and responsibility to, so honestly, who wrote the last 3 books you read? I can't remember who the last 3 books were. There was, I'm trying to think what the last 3 books I read. One that I'm kind of reading is, I'm struggling to remember the names of the books, to be honest, let alone who wrote them.
Okay. Sam, hit us.
So Tamsin Muir wrote Gideon the Ninth, which is what we're about. I'm reading a book by Jeff Vandermeer right now, Born. And before that, I read a book by Marco Kloos, who writes a lot of like space military fiction, in his like new Palladium Wars trilogy. Like I think like you can kind of remember that stuff if you're kind of a bit more into it. But it's a little bit different, I think, with like writers and authors and stuff like that. Like Calvin's kind of saying in chat, like I think I cannot remember who published those books at all, because the writer is more of like the brand that's going on, and like because that writer is the brand, they're more spurred on to make more stuff. And I think part of the argument that we have is like, because we are such a small team, getting credit matters more to us, especially when you think about Adventure Mart, because like depending on how well Adventure Mart does and how much interest we see in it is how we will take that like game forward. Like if there's going to ever be any Adventure Mart expansions, like we need to see it happening on our end. We need to fund it ourselves, pretty much. Like both with time and also money, if that makes sense.
Do you know the authors of or what the last 3 books you read were, Elaine?
Yeah, so it was, like I mentioned, Thames and Muir, Gideon the Ninth, because we both read that one. I read Stone Sky, the first N.K. Jemisin book?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember. Okay, yeah.
Beneath the Stone?
Beneath the Stone Sky, I think, was the first one, yeah. And I'm trying to think, because when was the last? I forget. Who was the author of The Magicians, actually? Because I keep. What was that? Sorry.
Lloyd Grossman? No.
Okay.
It's close though.
Okay. I keep going to say Patrick Rothfuss, and I'm like, no, that's Name of the Wind and all that stuff. But yeah.
And I only just managed to find out who wrote the last book I read. I managed to remember what its name was, which was You Said This Would Be Fun. I'm about halfway through it. It's by Jeff Warrender. I mean, yeah, I think we've established that there's different levels of awareness. Like, frankly, I struggled even to remember who wrote it. And that doesn't mean that it wasn't written well, let alone all the stuff that Colvin's talking about. And so, in the same way, frankly, as a person who's super into games, if there is a game that I particularly enjoy, I will, look at who made it and everything. But I'm not going to promise to remember it. I don't even know where I would learn who designed this plastic bottle. It seems like a ridiculous thing, but I don't think it is. Genuinely, there was a team of individuals who made this plastic bottle, and I don't see why product design, just because it's got utilitarian value, should be held as the crediting is less important. Maybe it's what Colvin is saying is because you're in-house staff. Sure, that makes a difference. And certainly, if I were being paid an hourly wage by anyone, then I would be quite happy for, if you pay me a decent hourly wage, you can do what you want with what I make. And I don't need to be credited. But
that's sad. That makes me sad. The idea that anybody spends their time on this earth, the short time that we have, in a capitalist, it's sort of like late stage capitalist nightmare, that someone can toil away their entire life and nobody anywhere records their credit. And that is heartbreaking to me. It doesn't matter if it's artists, doesn't matter if you are making a goddamn good pizza or a terrible pizza, doesn't matter. Someone should somewhere,
like the pot that's beside you, behind you, sorry.
Exactly. We should be able to go online and be like, I absolutely love the design of this pot. It has kept our plant cozy and comfortable for years. I want to be able to go online, find who made that, and whether it's toss them a bit of extra money, buy extra stuff for them. And I think that's where a lot of like the maker community gets really good. Things like you can go on Etsy, you can buy locally. That's what we were sort of saying earlier with like even something as silly as buying locally for coffee and things like that, because you can go in there, you can talk to someone a bit more about like where it came from and stuff. And that just feels like a bit more wholesome to me and a bit more rewarding of like someone's work.
Yeah, I think going back to like the reviews that we were talking about as well, and the like mentioning Hub Games but not really mentioning us. It's when you're reading that review and they're like, we absolutely love Adventure Mart, but it's like we're not kind of seeing that love kind of come our way. is kind of the thing that I think kind of gets us.
Yeah, I'd say that. But it is like degrees of interest. You're not gonna like.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, oh, this person didn't credit us, thus it is a bad review, or this person is bad because you don't remember. But it's a little bit like, I feel like the person's missing out.
Choice, and there's always an opportunity cost. I mean, if I take time and effort to know all the details of everything that I interact with, you know, I wouldn't be able to interact with very much at all in life. Yeah, and with a review, it's kind of okay, what is the purpose of the review? If the review is, I mean, do they even need to credit to publisher, frankly? In some ways, the only benefit of them saying it's Adventure Mart by Hub Games, or as opposed to saying it's Adventure Mart, is so that someone doesn't pick up a hypothetical Adventure Mart from another publisher. Like, there shouldn't be another Adventure Mart, do you know what I mean? But, you know, certainly if there was a game where there have been games with the same title, but there's an argument you don't even need any crediting in a review, because if a review is to talk about what's the how does this game make you feel, do you enjoy this, do you is it going along at a decent pace, is it coming to a satisfying conclusion, like how is this game to play, how will it fit into your life, does this game deserve your love, attention, time, and money? I don't see how credits are necessarily relevant in any review, you could argue.
I think it's to do with like connecting the dots, right? Like if you're, people do follow brands and personalities. You know, something like Stonemaier or whatever, people get excited when there is a new Stonemaier game coming out, or whatever. People do get attached to brands, identities, lines, and things like that. So there is a degree of, from the consumer's end, the very even like a top level base consumer can tend to get something out of at least knowing sort of like who the designers are and things like that, and who the publishers are. I don't know. What do you think, Sam? I realize I've been talking a lot. It's a topic I'm very passionate about.
I've been formulating my thoughts as we're going. Don't worry. I think it depends on the kind of review that you're reading as well, because games journalism has got kind of this thing where a lot of the reviews that you see are just adverts kind of spat out there. It's the old like GameSpot 6.5 great review where like everything's reviewed on a 7 to 9 scale, kind of, pretty much. Like how worth that review is on like sort of, I guess, the product versus the art or design, and what that review is trying to kind of evoke from the person reading it. So I do agree, like you could probably write a review where you don't credit anyone and you just talk about how the game feels to yourself, or like the bullet point reviews that just kind of go boom, 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 boom. This is all the things that this game does. It's sort of like a junk food style review, I guess you could call it. But then reading a review that goes like real deep and like into the design of the game step by step, is like clearly this person is invested in this game on like that kind of deeper level, and especially if they like really like it, then doing a little bit to kind of like prop up the people that made it specifically does help a lot, I think. And like I was saying earlier, like if anything else is going to happen in the Adventure Mart universe, it's going to start with us first. So the more that gets kind of funneled back our way will help spur us out into making more things, going out into the world. And I think, again, it's kind of depending on who made the game and what kind of the intent of the design is and how the studio feels about it. I think because DigiSprite, we're like a small group of 3 of us, like we're kind of designing, we're doing it for the love of it, really. Like this is our second job. and whether it becomes a full-time thing eventually one day, like that would be great. But right now, there's no point in us doing any project that we don't love, you know. So when we're reading reviews and stuff, it you know, like we're coming in from like a love thing. If I was working for like Fantasy Flight and making another Star Wars game, it's hard to tell how much that designer loves that game, because did this game exist because they created it and put it out there, or did this game exist because Disney went to Fantasy Flight and be like, we need 5 Star Wars games by the end of the year and we don't really care how they come out as long as you make them and they cost this much and they have this many components and maybe here's an abstract idea to work around. It's like
I think a lot of things are like, some things are going to come from the marketers. Certainly at Hasbro, it's like, okay, we need this to have a new Risk in this quarter. We need to have a new Trivial Pursuit. We need a new Monopoly for this week. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of bottom-up stuff that is going to be a labor of love for the designer, for sure. I mean, I feel like this is something that we should really talk about more fully on another day, because I will say my piece and then I'll let you two say your final pieces before we kind of nail this thing in the head for today. I'm not saying I don't want to talk more about it, just, you know, I'm aware that you've got limited time. All I want to say is that if you've got like something like 3-minute board games, which Jay annoys me because most of those are about 3 minutes 45 seconds, which is a lot more than 3 minutes. But anyway, I'll have this discussion with them on Tuesday when they come over. But I'm being really negative and crab it these days, aren't I? I hope people don't think of me that. I'm sorry. Anyway, so if you've got a tiny brief review, and if your focus is let's give people a snapshot, then I wouldn't call it necessarily a junk food review. But at the same time, having that brevity, just saying, okay, this is the game, blah, 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 and tell you all about it. That's the main things that you need to hear. I think that's credits and crediting. I don't think there's any clear answer.
Yeah. Like, okay. I guess, yeah, if you're wanting like closing thoughts on that, yes. Okay. It is contextual. It depends on the context of the review, what the review is trying to do. But at the end of the day, we should all be credited more for the labors that we do on a daily basis, whether that is something mundane or whether that is something artistic or whatever. Capitalism will suck your credit away if you let it, both financially and emotionally. A signed pizza, yeah, your name on the box. But yeah. That's my closing thoughts.
Yeah, my thoughts are kind of much the same. I think there's also definitely like board game reviewing kind of hasn't figured itself out yet. I think it's getting there, but it's kind of the same problem that like video game reviewing has and has had for a long time. And it's kind of like how do you consume reviews versus the people that you follow, and then how do they, because it kind of comes down to how the reviewers want to make the review appear, but maybe they're not always thinking about that from their own perspective. So yeah, I'd also agree that it is a very deep subject to talk about, for sure. But I know that I do love seeing, my favorite reviews of Adventure Mart are people who get really deep into the mechanics of it and kind of really get it. From my view, and I definitely resonate with those reviews the most. I read it like a couple the past couple of weeks that just really got me wanting to design more Adventure Mart stuff. And I think that's really the big positive of crediting people in reviews, is like if you really love something, you can show it and you can credit the people who made it, and if that spurs them to make on more things, then that's the perfect like capitalistic art review cycle from start to finish.
Alan Outson earlier asked if you'd like it to become a full-time job, and I think Sam touched upon this.
Yes, I think it's hard to tell how the world's kind of going to go with the future of being able to just make board games in a full-time thing. Like some days I'm like, I would absolutely love to just wake up and do game design all day, and play tests like much more often. But the reality is of like the board game market being like even more competitive. Like walking around a shop like the UK Games Expo floor, sometimes I'm just like, oh, that's a lot of board games. I don't know if I've got enough ideas that are unique versus all these other things, or I could design something better than all these other things. And then there's just like designs that you can't even really reach. Like nobody can really make another Magic the Gathering these days because that thing is just a monopolistic behemoth of a game. Even though like deep down in my heart, I'm just like, I would love to make a TCG from start to finish. But like the absolute work and effort behind that thing is just insane. So yes, it would be nice, but the future is uncertain, and who knows?
Anything to add, Elaine? Sorry.
No, just that. Like, I think at the end of the day, our dreams are always that we want to wake up every day and work on something that makes us happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for everyone at DigiSprite, making games is that. It makes us happy, and in an idealistic world, we would all just be able to do that. We'd be able to wake up and in a wonderful idealized post-scarcity economy with universal basic income and things like that. It would be the artist's dream. You wake up and you work on something that makes you passionate, not for financial recompense or anything, not because you want to make money, but because it makes you happy and it fulfills you and your life and gives your life meaning and things like that. So absolutely, would absolutely love to do that. And I'm sure
Calvin's points that you have to design something you like, otherwise no one else will. I think Calvin means otherwise no one else will like it, rather than saying no one else would make that thing.
Yeah. 100%.
Although you could read it both ways.
No one else will design the thing that you like.
Yeah, like maybe if you got to make something that's somewhat uniquely you, but it's really difficult to know what saying this has to be something unique. I mean, there is definitely that's true, and if you just design something that already exists, it's like, what's the point in that? But at the same time, if you have to say, well, I have to design that only I could have designed, that's a lot of pressure. And I think that's an unfair amount of pressure to put on the designer. I don't think that's what Calvin means, though.
Yeah.
But Calvin said, what would you make if you had an unlimited budget? Do you have an idea?
Wow. I'd make some kind of trading, like not a trading card game, but like a dueling card game for sure. I have so many. I was sitting down the other day and like, I come up with like a lot of impossible board game ideas, where it's like, it could conceivably exist if you could throw absolutely all the money in the world at it. But for like even a team, even like a full-time DigiSprite team, would never be able to like surmount that sort of mountain, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. There's a subset of games where you do need millions, to get people going, or there are some games that can only be printed, but if you're going to print hundreds of thousands or millions of copies to get the cost down to a certain thing.
I would also definitely probably make like Adventure Mart expansions forever. If we have the opportunity to, I'd make them until people are sick of them.
For me, the answer is 100% Adventure Mart anime. Just that would completely solidify the circle of this wonderful thing, which is like inspired by a lot of like anime and things like that. I would absolutely love a slice of life anime set in an Adventure Mart.
Now, Alex is asking if you see digital games as, I'm going to rephrase the question, as any revenue stream for DigiSprite.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Do you have any digital games right now?
Not right now. No.
No, but it's definitely something I've been thinking about when it comes to like future design and stuff like that. Is how easily can this game be translated into even just tabletop simulator for like testing. Like when I'm thinking about dueling card games these days, I try and think about like, could I play this game with a webcam pointed at my desk to play with somebody else over Skype or Zoom who also has the game pointed at their desk? And I think for certain games, again, like if you're trying to make some kind of dueling card game and you're going up against the behemoth that is Magic the Gathering, having access to a worldwide base of players is much better than trying to like find a couple of people at your LGS that play the one game that you want to play. Like that's the thing I kind of see the most. Our local game shop is mostly Magic, and like there's a good like Yu-Gi-Oh population as well. But when it comes to something like Netrunner or all the LCGs from Fantasy Flight, there's always just a very small pod of people, but not enough to really support like a big organized play type thing. But taking something like that and making it digital so that there is a worldwide audience for it, I think is very important for not just us, but for like game designers in the future making board games and thinking, how can we make like remote play even a thing?
Well, I think those are the ends of the questions. I'm going to close it up there. And to recap, what we've been basically talking about, I guess, is that there's a lot of people involved. Sometimes, if you can credit them, we had a brief foray into that. We did basically talk about collaboration and how you all met and the unique things that everyone brings. And we didn't even really touch into the Kickstarter rules. I mean, talking about credits, I mean, if we wanted to credit it, it's like, who wrote the text for your Kickstarter? Who's doing the marketing for that? I mean,
we do all the Kickstarter stuff on our end.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we've done a campaign, like all the video editing is Elaine, 100%.
I know it's you plural. I just meant which
yeah.
of you individuals specifically does like the writing,
right.
Who does like the kind of all the getting stuff to reviewers, who does the there's a lot of little bits of work in there that I don't know if you want to spend. Maybe we can have you on back at some points in the future and before your Kickstarter wraps up, and then we can go into the credits for your game.
Yeah, possibly. It's going to be a busy month.
Yeah.
Sure. But how is working with people good? Because I guess you've got more ideas. Anything more to add on that?
Working with people is good because you're not doing it alone. You can prop each other up in your weaknesses, and when you're sad or when you're being down on yourself, and you can celebrate the victories together, and just creating things together is, in my opinion, far better than creating something in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's always good to have people around that you can share your passions with from like a designing perspective, and also from like playing the games as well.
And are there any bad things about working with other people as opposed to doing it more on your own?
I guess in general, you need to be good at taking feedback. And that's just a general skill for anyone who wants to design or write or create anything. Like being able to take good feedback objectively is like the primary thing. Because otherwise, and also give good feedback is another one. Because sometimes you'll get feedback that is spicy, and you're like, wow, give me a second to recover from that one. So it does just come down to giving and receiving feedback, if done incorrectly, can be bad.
You kind of said what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. We can skim over that. So you can go for the next one, Sam, if you wish, which is just final tips to close us off. if someone else were, you know, thinking, oh man, I enjoy making games, but maybe Bez is thinking slightly enviously at Team DigiSprite, thinking, oh, if only there were people who lived near me, and I want a bit of what Robyn, Elaine, and Sam have got.
I guess a tip these days is to try and do it digitally. I think everyone outside of ourselves who tested Familiar Alchemy was through a digital playtest so far. So there's definitely tools to be doing that kind of stuff these days without having people immediately around you. If you live in the middle of nowhere, if you've got an internet connection, you can do it. It's just kind of getting over that initial social anxiety of interacting with other humans over the internet, which I still have problems with these days, but you know.
I guess you need to make sure that you all have very similar ambitions and that are all aligned.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like the most important thing. Do you have anything to say before we wrap up, Elaine?
Just in general, or is this
No,
our
for the tips?
Oh, for the tips, right? Okay. Yeah. Everyone sort of being on the same page. Make it very clear whenever you're starting a project, and this is the producer brain clicking in. Whenever you're starting a project, make sure that there is a clear vision. Is like the thing, and everyone knows kind of what they're signing on for. If you've got like half of the team who are signing on who think it's going to be, we're going to poke a fun prototype for a couple of weeks, play it, and then walk away, and that's fine. And then if the other half are like, we're Kickstarter launching in October, blah 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 blah, you're going to have problems. So just make sure that whenever you're starting a project, everyone is on the same page on the goals and the scope of the project. Is kind of, and that's just my producer hat just tipping on for a second.
Now, I want to thank everyone who's been watching. I want to... Sorry. I want to thank Alan Alton, Alex, Colvin for popping in, and and most importantly, I want to thank you, Sam and Elaine. We can all meet in the middle. We can all meet in the middle.
Okay, we got this.
Okay, and thank you, everyone. And if you wish to find me, then I am stuffbybez.bigcartel.com. You can buy my stuff. Twitter.com/stuffbybez. Post a lot. Instagram.com/stuffbybez, which is basically just pictures of pretty things on my games. Twitch.tv/stuffbybez. The stream. Facebook.com/thingsbybez is a thing. Or stuffbybez@gmail.com if you wish to email me. Now, if you wish to find Team DigiSprite, the links are going to be, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, then they're on the description. If you're on Twitch, then I've just shared them. Is there anything else that you would... Oh, I'm sorry to keep you so long. Looking forward to Hopes and Ambitions. It's over to you for this final section. As we say goodbye, I am looking forward to playing games with my family over Skype, possibly, in an hour. We're probably going to play a quick quiz game in a Wits and Wagers style. Is there anything that you're looking forward to, or is it all about the Kickstarter? I should actually put a thing up for that, yeah. So yeah, tell me what you're looking forward to.
Yeah. The Kickstarter is like the big one for me. I'm working on polishing up all of the site and getting all the videos and everything done. That's as it says on screen there, 21st of August. That's this coming Friday. And the Kickstarter will go live. So that's like the big one for me. And then after that, it's going to be working on the Adventure Mart tabletop role-playing game.
Yep.
So
yes, Familiar Alchemy Kickstarter starting Friday. Seeing more Adventure Mart out in the world, people playing it and stuff is still jarring and a fun experience. And personally, for the rest of the day, I am looking forward to brunch and
Nice.
getting my word count done for the day.
I like it.
Nice.
Okay, and we've had lots of thanks, and good wishes. And if you have enjoyed this, share, spread the word. My next stream is going to be tomorrow at 10 a.m. UK time. I'm talking to Lolvi about LARPs. And then Tuesday, I'm talking to Jay from 3 Minute Board Games. And then there's going to be a lots of stuff going on. UK Games Expo this weekend. I'm going to be basically doing a stream every couple of hours for the bulk of the day. Hopefully showing off a lot of games and stuff. And I'm sure that if you check out Team DigiSprite, they will have all sorts of playthroughs and opportunities to try out games that you can see there.
Yep, we're running familiar Alchemy digital playtests the whole weekend, pretty much. If people want one, we've got you can go on our Twitter and find links to the sort of like book a slot for a playtest if you want to try it out.
Oh yeah, and I'm still hoping to get more people to help me out. I've got now I've got the L deck up on Tabletopia. I'm probably going to put up Kitty Cataclysm like tomorrow, and we are going to be playing the big events game in a bond or Yogi Stock Guru. I think we've decided is the Yogi-ish name, because in a bond is anyway. Let's not get too much into that. Let's just say bye, 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 bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Internet.